What is up, everybody? Brian Mendler back in your life on another edition of the podcast. And today I am super excited to be joined by Rebecca Rowland. It's so good to see you. And your book is called The Art of Talking with Children, which I just want to tell you is a fantastic title. I love the title. And I was telling you before we came on that I just bought a copy of it, and it was only $7, by the way, which is fantastic. So appreciate that. I was saying, I don't know how you're going to get rich on that. But that said, so as I was looking at your title, I was thinking, man, like I pride myself on being good at this, right? Like being good at talking with children, but my own children, I struggle with that so much. Do you notice that? Like, is it different talking to your own kids than it is other people's, and why?
Yeah, actually, that's so funny that
nice
you asked.
Nice to see you, by the way.
Yeah, you too. Great to be here. And actually, yeah, that's one of the funny things about this book is that's what inspired me to write the book, really, is that I found that I was, really studying, teaching, kids a lot. I was talking with kids a lot, but my own kids, I was sort of on autopilot with, or at best, we were often kind of in a rut. And I realized, like, what is going on here? Because I do think it's so much harder. You slip into patterns that you're not necessarily aware with, even though you've been taught otherwise, or you've learned otherwise. So for sure.
And I feel like our own kids push our buttons, right? Like if your kid did something, it wouldn't annoy me. But when my own kid does it, it does. And I think it's because we see ourselves in our kids, and those parts of our kids are the parts that we least like about ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah, we get triggered, I'd say, definitely much more easily with our own kids.
So tell me about this. Like, what do you do? What do you do to get better at it?
Yeah. So it's funny because I'm a speech pathologist by training. So I have studied really specifically kind of like what language, makes the most sense with kids. And I think obviously looking at what your podcast and your work on Twitter and everything, I feel like you think a lot about this also. So
I do.
It was great to read all that. And so for me, I developed what I call the ABCs of talking with kids. So try to make it really laid out there, just a framework you could have in mind kind of anytime you're with any kind of child. And A is just adaptive. So it means that you actually are tailoring your talk to the child, to the situation, really specifically. So however, whatever respect means for that child, you're sort of tailoring to that child and to even the mood and the temperament of the child. And so B is the back and forth, meaning that we're often like talking at our kids. Like we want to, just kind of a stream of talk. And we don't always take the time to say, well, what is this child really trying to tell me? And just kind of sitting with that. So that's kind of the B part. And then C is the child driven. So really starting with, okay, what is on this child's mind, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, in between, just really taking the time to be with that and validate that before moving on to whatever's, you want to get across.
So, and there's a fourth one, right?
Well, that I would say, like, I put those three together and I say that leads to kind of more successful interaction. So that's kind of like the end result is like more talk success when you manage to do those three things, which is, I think a work in progress for all of us.
Right. So can you take me through like an example of how you would use those things with a kid?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say you have like a younger child and they're, you got home from work and they're wanting to tell you like their toy truck is out of batteries or something, like they're running their toy truck around like it's out of batteries, it's not working. And, and you're saying your sort of default is like, well, oh, was your teacher out today? What did Jimmy say? And your child is like running into you and saying, but can you fix this toy? I don't know what's wrong with it, And so that's kind of the default, I would say, that I found myself in. And, we're often at that point getting annoyed, like both of us are getting annoyed.
Right.
So kind of taking a step back from that interaction and saying, okay, let's just for a moment, sit with this child and then really look at, you're realizing there's excitement here, there's, upset about whatever the toy is, and just start to ask questions like, well, what do you think is wrong with this toy? Do you think it's the batteries? Like, could it be something else? Like, what do you think we could do to fix it? So you're actually sitting and engaging with that issue and that child and kind of building that moment of connection before moving into whatever's on your agenda in terms of getting out information. And I think at that point, the child is oftentimes wants to talk about their day, but not exactly at that moment. So you're actually adapting to what the child wants and is what's on the child's mind at that moment.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as, respond rather than react. And I think, and I love the kind of using the idea of using questions, right? Because questions in general can't be argued, right? Why do you think it's broken? Or what do you think went wrong? It's the same with behavior with kids in school, right? It's the same sort of mindset. It's, well, what do you think you could do differently next time? How could you regulate yourself? And utilizing that often takes the argument away from kids. So you're a speech pathologist, which, by the way, my son, so I have a special place in my heart for speech pathologists, because in general, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, it's just the truth, I didn't really know what you did until I needed you.
Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of people.
When I needed you, and I was like, holy cow, my own kid has a speech impediment. I need you. And I realized what you do, which is you give kids a voice, which what better thing in the world could there be to give a human being than a voice? So, he stuttered from, a young age. It was mostly anxiety driven is what they said. And he would store his anxiety in his in his mouth. And it's much better. He's gotten much better, but it was intense work that he's had to do on it. So thank you for the work that you did.
Yeah.
How did you get into this, and kind of what led you into this career path?
Yeah, so it's funny because I started out really as a creative writer. I was always interested in language and poetry, and I still am. I still write poetry and teach creative writing. So it's something that's a big passion of mine. But when I started, actually, I moved abroad. I went to Greece, and I was working with a lot of kids, and there's not a big special education system there. So they're just, kids who were not doing well. They just kind of, at least at the school I was at, they just was saying, well, we don't really know what to do. And their behavior problems, they tended to be behavior problems. So, they just said they're a behavior problem, not looking at, well, why is this child acting out? Or what do you think is frustrating? Or why are they not able to do well in school? So I was actually tutoring a lot of these kids and realizing that they didn't actually have behavior problems. It was much more language problems, actually. So they were having trouble communicating, or they were, not able to translate well because a lot of the classes were in English and they were Greek speakers and all of this. And I didn't know what to do. So it was actually sort of my lack of knowledge that brought me to this field where I felt just like, oh, I'm failing these children. And when I go away back to my, back to America, obviously so much of these patterns are just going to continue. They're not sure what to do. They just kind of drop out of school. It was just a whole cycle. And it made me feel so, sad and kind of frustrated for the situation. And I felt I didn't have the skills to know what to do. So that really led me to want to learn
What
more.
did you do? So what did you do when you were in Greece?
Yeah, I mean, I taught classes. I taught English classes. I did tutoring. And I guess what I tried to do was just to be as responsive as I could to what the children or students needed at the time. So that's kind of where that responsiveness, I actually realized that by sitting with the children and saying well, what's happening in your mind when you're trying to read this, or what's going on with, when I was just sitting and kind of in a responsive and attentive way, really listening to their thought processes, I realized there was so much more than just, oh, I'm skipping class, or, oh, I'm, doing whatever. There was just a real frustration. And oftentimes they were reading way below grade level, and so they weren't understanding what was happening in class. So they were just sort of like, oh, I'm checked out, basically. Yeah. So that's what I tried to do, is I tutored them and kind of tried to help, in the moment as much as I could. But then I also thought, and I found that having conversations with them and supporting them to say well, you're not just a bad student. You're not, you might be having trouble, but that's not all of who you are, anything like that. To help them get beyond those labels, I felt like it was really helpful.
I feel like it's so hard to convince a kid of that, though. Yeah. So how do you do that? How do you, it's one thing to say it, right? It's another thing to actually, show a kid. And I
Yeah.
think that's why success has to come first, right? There's
Yeah.
like a cycle, and I call it the success cycle, where
Mhm.
think of like a clock, and where the 12 would be, you have the word success, and
Yeah.
where the 3 would be is the word confidence, and where the 9
Mhm.
would be is the word competent. And think of a
Yeah.
ball that spins between those 3 words, because in life, those 3 words are breeders of each other. They breed each. Success breeds
Exactly.
confidence.
Mhm.
Once I become
Yeah.
confident, I start to get better at something, which
Yeah,
makes me more
exactly. Mhm.
successful. And it's this
Mhm.
amazing cycle that some kids have never tasted, right? They've never
Yeah. Yeah.
been
Mhm.
in
Right.
any of the 3. And one of
Mhm.
the things that I teach teachers to do is sometimes you gotta, of course, metaphorically, or I think it's metaphorically, but shove a kid in to that's
Yeah.
not really shove them, but
Yeah,
shove
yeah.
them
No, of course.
and
Yeah, yeah,
make
yeah.
them feel one of those things. And
Mhm.
whatever I have to do as a teacher to make you feel
Mhm.
success, right? And it's like
Yeah.
that T-ball analogy for little
Mhm.
kids. Like we start baseball by putting a ball on a tee, because we
Yeah.
know,
Mhm.
right? Success, there's nothing more nauseating than watching a
Mhm.
kid swing and miss like 30
Yeah.
times. And
Oh, yeah.
everyone's like, should we bring in the tee or
Mhm.
not, right?
Right, right.
And
Yeah,
particularly
exactly.
T-ball. And next thing you know, the kid's like, they don't want to play, right? I want to go
Right, for
swim and I don't want to play
sure.
baseball, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how did you do that? Like to kind of get, so 2 questions here.
Mhm.
One, into the minds of the kids, but
Yeah.
also right into the minds of the teachers,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
this is
Mhm.
sort of the path to take with these kids.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a great point, and there are a couple things I think, and one of them is to really help kids help with that scaffolding process. Like, how can you find success where you are? So I think with the T-ball thing, we often do one of 2 things. Like either we just let them, keep going, and it's like this painful process, or we, make it so easy that it's like, oh look, they're doing amazing, it's so great, and the
Right,
child that's sort of empty, because it's
right.
like the
One or the
child
other
sees.
extremes.
Yeah. And I mean, kids know, like if you're either praising them for nothing, or if you are making it so easy that they're obviously going to succeed, it's much
Right,
too easy for them.
right,
That's not challenging. So I think kids like to feel competent, but feel competent at something that they know is hard enough in some ways. So it's a big enough challenge so that they actually strove for it rather than just, sitting there
right,
and like, oh, good
right,
job.
right.
And
It's
so,
tough to find
yeah,
that balance though
yeah,
sometimes,
yeah.
right? Because
Oh, for sure. Mhm.
that's like a real balance that you have to kind of find as a teacher, where you're like, I don't want it to be too easy, but I also can't
Mhm.
make it so hard where, they're hitting
Exactly.
90-mile-an-hour fastballs when they're 7 years old, right? Like
Exactly.
that's going to
Yeah,
make them
yeah,
want to
mhm.
quit really quick. So what do you
Yeah.
do specifically?
Yeah, so it's funny because I teach educational assessment actually, at Harvard, and part of what I do there is I teach how to really not just use like big high stakes assessment or something, but how to assess every day and to really see carefully where is a child and whatever skills. And I actually think that kind of attention to figuring out, well, what is your skill level? What can you do? What can't you do? Is just the foundation for building success. Because when you know where a child is, you're able to sort of, titrate or scaffold, whatever, make it the right hardness, given experience. Whereas if you don't know that, you're just kind of guessing. And it's really hard to guess, I would say. So that's one thing. And I also help kids see that, for example, I help them sort of contextualize things. So what part of reading is hard for you? Not just like you're a bad reader, but like let's see what's difficult for you and then help you set goals to get those skills improved. So it's not just like let's help. A lot of times kids just over label themselves like, oh, I'm slow at reading, so that means I'm just bad, because maybe in that classroom you're supposed to be a fast reader, and if you're not, that means you're a bad reader.
Yeah.
So, and that's not true necessarily. Like,
Right.
you
Right.
don't have to
Do
read
you
as
see
fast as everybody.
patterns? Are there patterns that you
Mhm.
see develop among kids
Mhm.
of what they believe about themselves? And I also
Yeah.
think it's what they believe about themselves, but it's also what they're told. I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh, for sure.
right? Like
Mhm.
when you're
Yeah.
told something over and over again, you start to believe it,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
no matter what it is.
definitely. Yeah, and I do think like a lot of schooling does emphasize kind of speed and quickness in ways that aren't necessarily helpful. Like if it's like how fast did you do these math problems or how fast did you read that paragraph? It is important we know like to read at a reasonable speed, but it's not that important to be like the fastest reader in the class.
Right.
And so people, kids so often are like, oh, I'm stupid or oh, I can't do it. When they see other kids who, they finish, they flip the paper over, they're like, I'm done, and
Right.
the slower kids are like, oh, I
I
can't do it,
know.
you know?
Right. That
Yeah.
was me. That was me.
Yeah.
That was exactly me as a kid.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
well, and then you're just like, how are these kids all done
Yeah.
already? Right. And sometimes, so one of my rules, for special ed kids is that we don't like surprises. In
Mhm.
general, as a special ed kid, I don't like
Yeah.
surprises, right? I don't
Uh-huh.
like pop tests and
Right.
quizzes. I don't like activities where you have a
Mhm.
ball and you get to throw it to
Oh,
someone and they
right.
catch
Yeah,
it and
yeah.
answer questions. No,
Mhm.
I don't like any of that
Yeah,
because
yeah.
everything takes me a little longer, right?
Mhm.
Things in that realm take me longer. And so, right, so the goal for me is give me the thing ahead of time, like
Yeah, yeah.
instead, or you rig it, right? Like if you're
Right.
going to do that game where you throw the ball to somebody, you tell
Mhm.
the person the
Yeah.
day before the question. Here's the
Uh-huh.
question. Or if you play Jeopardy
Right,
or one of those things,
exactly.
give
Yeah,
them the
yeah.
question, and
Mhm.
you can even give them the answer the
Right,
day
exactly.
before
Yeah,
and
yeah.
say your job is to go home and learn this. So
Yeah.
when
Mhm.
I call on you
Yeah.
tomorrow and I ask you this question, here's
Mhm.
what I'll ask you. But here's what I'll ask you, and here's what you can answer to make yourself look good in front of everyone. And that's
Exactly.
the goal, And then sometimes the
Mhm.
teacher walks by, and she's trying to be helpful, but she's like,
Mhm.
only 20 more minutes. And I'm
Oh,
like, yeah,
yeah.
that's
Like,
not
yeah.
helpful.
No, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
Mhm.
instead, and the other thing about real life is I just think it's so different from school because in real life, like, I mean, for the most part, nobody really times you. Like you can,
Right.
even this, like people will listen to this and they can go back and re-listen to it, and they can go
Exactly.
back again and re-listen
Mhm.
to it. And like
Yeah, yeah.
no one scores them or judges them or
Right.
critiques them on that. So
Yeah.
why does it matter in school so
Yeah.
much?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do. Like we've gotten into this pattern where we judging not the quality of thinking or like how deep or is that, activity, how much did you do or get out of it, but we're judging like how quick. It's almost like this factory model, that's been in history has been for a long time that we're like, let's just get it done fast and then okay, you finished, you're first, kind of like a race. And yeah, it's not authentic. It doesn't really represent a lot of what we need in school. And I do think it's much more helpful to move away from that and towards like, portfolios, like other ways of showing what kids can do that aren't, based on doing something as fast as possible.
So I just want to learn a little bit more about you because you kind of glossed over it that you work at Harvard and you teach at Harvard. And so how does one get to Harvard? Like, let me just ask it like that. Like in life, how does
In
your
life.
journey go so that you get to Harvard? Good
Yeah,
student
good
in
question.
school yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I was a pretty good student. I wasn't the best student. I wasn't valedictorian or anything like that. I mean, I got mostly A's, but I guess I was really engaged in different activities. I'd probably say that's how it started. Like I did tons of
Mm,
sports. I was like running, doing swimming, and then I ran like the newspaper. So I was kind of doing a lot of leadership type activities. I think just because I was interested in everything and I couldn't really decide what to do.
that's good.
So yeah, I just kind of got involved in a lot of stuff. Yeah, and I really liked teaching, and I guess like I after that I started like doing a lot on my own in terms of volunteer activities, and maybe that was helpful, but I definitely wasn't like a star student or anything like that. So
What did you do? So tell me about the volunteer stuff.
yeah, so I did a lot actually teaching kind of thing. So I wrote poetry and I taught and volunteer, like I taught other teenagers writing. Because I was even really back then interested in kind of that issue of voice and how do we help people and kids who aren't able to really express themselves do that
Mm,
better. And actually one thing I remember is my first job actually was kind of like they let me be a reporter in high school for this really small local newspaper, and there was like a tornado, which is pretty unusual. I grew up in Georgia,
mm.
but we had a huge tornado hit our neighborhood. And I remember like my first assignment, I was actually walking around like my neighborhood, which had been almost totally, ripped up with all these trees everywhere. And I started asking people like, well, how are you feeling? What happened? And I was taking all these pictures and kind of realizing like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like that you can, actually start to
Not the
engage with
tornado
people.
part.
Not the
Yeah.
tornado part. No, no, no. Yeah. Not the tornado. It was
Yeah,
pretty
yeah, yeah.
scary
I
actually.
got you.
But
Right.
yeah, but just to really get involved in the neighborhood in that way, like I hadn't actually talked to that many
Mm.
people and to realize like, oh, there's like so many stories here. That was really fulfilling for me. So
Where in
yeah,
Georgia?
just outside of Atlanta. Yeah, like
Which
suburban
part?
Atlanta. Dunwoody, Dorville. I don't know if you
Okay.
know that area.
Well,
Yeah.
I know Atlanta pretty well. I mean, but one of my best friends lives in Buckhead, and
Oh yeah.
He's like number 3 in the Falcons organization. So
Oh wow.
I live in Tampa, but I become a big Falcons fan over the years. We're trying to get him to
For
win.
sure.
And actually it's really great. Every fall, we all, like 8 of our best college friends, converge on Atlanta. And he hooks up a game. Like we go to and he's actually ruined my sporting experience. I can't go to sporting events normally anymore. Because when we go with him, it's like you literally, like, you're in you're going through doors that normal people don't go through. And seats,
oh my gosh, that's awesome.
I know. We had the last game, we had a full ice cream sundae bar in our suite, which was I know, it was really cool. So
that's great.
You volunteer, which, by the way, I was thinking when you were saying that, what social media has done for the world now, where everybody can be that kind of a reporter, right? Everybody can go around and just hit post or go live, and the world can see you, which is what a world. So from that, and you just continue to go on in education. What did you do in terms of schools?
So I actually, what's funny is I went to public school in Georgia, and I went to a summer program actually in high school at Yale, which is where I ended up going to college, because I went there and I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like all these people talking about stuff I like to talk about, they were like really into books and all this stuff. And so, when I applied to colleges, that's where I wanted to go. So I went there undergrad. After that, I did various things. I moved to New York. I moved to Greece. Then I came back to study speech pathology. And I ended up getting my doctorate at Harvard after that. So like a ton of education. Like, I think I just really like to learn. So I'm really, I almost feel like if I could, I would just keep going and keep starting new ideas, new activities. And for me, it's really fun to feel like a beginner kind of in a new subject. So I think that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah. And that goes back to that feeling of success, right? Like, and sort of, my show, I talk about behavior and difficult kids and kids who struggle. And it's like, how do we get them to love learning like that? And that's really for teachers to think about, like, what can I do to get this kid to love being here? And how can I make that the foundation? And, I don't think it's always easy to do that with certain kids.
Oh yeah, no, it's hard. I mean, definitely. I think oftentimes kids in that cycle, like when they've experienced so little success, it's sort of like they come to you feeling really frustrated and having an attitude that this isn't going to be fun because it hasn't been fun. So and I think to even understand that and see, I mean, I do a lot of work with kids who've, had dyslexia and haven't been diagnosed for many years. And so, they come to reading and just generally to learning, like they're really, obviously an attitude of like, this is going to be hard for me, because it probably does feel really hard. And I think to realize why kids are having that attitude, instead of saying, oh, they're just unmotivated, or, oh, they're just not, whatever, but to realize like, this has been probably years of feeling like, oh, I'm trying to do something that I can't do, or that is hard for me, and that people don't understand why it's hard for me. I think is really important, like to empathize with those kids. It's hard to do sometimes, but I think really important.
Do you see a direct correlation, or is there a direct correlation between kids who struggle with reading and kids who struggle with speaking?
Yeah, actually it does. One of the signs of dyslexia, actually, there are some signs in terms of speaking as well. So yeah, definitely. I see those linked for sure. Even kids who mix up words, things like that, are more likely to have dyslexia. So yeah, you can see it earlier than sometimes people think.
Because that was not the case for me. So for me as a student, I struggled with reading, but I was really good at talking.
And sometimes you see that too.
But my reading struggles were not dyslexia. My reading struggles were ADHD. I just couldn't sit still long enough to pay attention. And so I would be interested in what I was reading, but then something will come on the TV and I'd be more interested in that. And then, this and that. And, I always joke, my brother was an amazing student. He was an incredible student in school. And I always joke that, my brother has this ability to be reading a book and get a text message on his phone and not see who it's from until he's done reading. That's unbelievable to me.
That's amazing. Right? I'm not at that level, but that's cool.
I'm reading it. I'm like, but someone's,
what?
No, right. And I'm, it's such a difficult skill to remain and be able to be focused. So give me some of your best, like for teachers, what are some of your best like tips and tricks and strategies for kids who struggle with speaking and or with reading?
Yeah, so I'd say the first one is to figure out kind of what are their strengths. Like, so just take, whatever it is, I would say interests and strengths. Because often we see that kids do so much better if they're able to read something that they're actually interested in. And often take a step back between, sometimes things have to happen. So kids have to read this book or whatever, but oftentimes it's less than we think. So, a lot of teachers have these assumptions about, magazines or graphic novels, they're like, oh, that's not really reading or that's not really work or whatever.
Right.
But, if you can get started there, the most important thing I would say is to get a child to feel okay or even good, but even okay about reading. So if that is, reading a magazine about cars, or if it is reading a graphic novel that they like because they like the pictures, to start there and to feel like that's okay. Like that's actually good if the child's attitude is changing.
Do people
Yeah.
not think that though
Yeah,
right now?
yeah,
They don't. There are actually people out there that we have to explain this to. That's what's amazing. There's sometimes I get done teaching workshops and I'm like, I can't believe I just had to explain that.
No, I mean,
because this is one of those for me.
Yeah. No, exactly. Like that's the thing is people have said to me, like, is it okay if they're reading graphic novels or is it, and I'm like, what do you mean? Is it okay? Like I almost like didn't understand the question. And it's like, like it's mostly pictures. I'm like, but there are words there too, right? And like, yeah, there are words. I'm like, okay, so yeah, it's okay. And so I do feel like there's that attitude, or even the rules about reading, like you have to read 20 minutes a night. It's like, well, why? Like, why? What does that mean? What is that doing to a child when they're like, it's 19 minutes and I'm done and I really don't like this book? It's like, well, why don't you stop? And why don't next time you find a book you like better? I mean, that kind of thing. Like,
so that's interesting though. So is that you recommend that? So like, if your kid is reading and, like how much do you give a book until you kind of throw it away versus where you say, well, push through it because it's pushing through hard things is good.
Yeah. I mean, I do think like to give it some time, like not just to say, oh, I read one page, like, cause sometimes you could say like, well, when you can model it for them. Like when I read a book, like, yeah, I might not like the first page, but I'm going to give it a chance. Like, I'm just going to say, I'll read the first, let's say 2 chapters. And maybe I'll skim and read part of the middle just to see if like, is it going to get better or not, but sort of model a more flexible attitude rather than saying like, you must read up to page 50 and then you can stop. It's not really doing, you want to model what actually happens in the real world, which is like, yeah, we do give things a chance. But then if we're given, we give them a chance, they're not interesting, they don't look like they're getting better, then we can stop. It's not as if, we're not forcing ourselves. There are lots of books to read in the world. So, showing that, like, yeah. And, and I think to show kids that we're on their side. So like we understand, but we're also can model for them. What do we do as readers? We want to enjoy our books. And if we're like at some point saying, I don't like the subject, and helping them analyze like, well, what might be a good next book? Is it that you don't like the subject matter? Is it that, the words are too hard? Like, what is it about this book? And that actually uses the book and this, the struggle they're having as kind of a teaching moment too, to build their self-awareness, So it's like, they can actually say like, well, I like the subject. I really like cars, but I think like all these words, I don't know what they are. And so I can't get into it, and we're like, okay, well, so that tells you something, it's actually too hard, let's get
so then let's find a book about cars that's written at an easier level.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So I think that's one thing we often ignore.
And so you're really always really kind of always goes back to building relationships, which is getting to know the kid, getting to know what they like, what are they interested in, and then bringing your content to them, right?
Exactly.
I talk about like 2 different islands, sometimes I feel like we're on, like teachers are on their own island over here with their content, with their lesson. And I feel like in general, teaching, like the way we do lesson plans needs an overhaul, because the thought process with most teachers is, I'm going to create my lesson over here in my world, and then you're going to come over here and learn my lesson, right? Here's my classroom. This is my world. There's my lesson. Come in and learn my lesson. And like, that's been traditional teaching for forever, but that's not really the world these kids are growing up in. These kids are growing up in a delivery world, a world of Grubhub and Uber Eats and Amazon. And, you got to bring it to me.
Right.
I'm not leaving my
Yeah,
house,
yeah,
right?
yeah, no,
Like,
for
and
sure.
so
Yeah.
deliver it here. And
Mhm.
so, and I think that's a better mindset, right? The
Mhm.
mindset is, right, and I can't
Yeah.
deliver something if I don't know
Right.
where you are,
Right,
right? I have to
exactly.
know your
Yeah.
address. I have to
Right.
know where you stay. I have to know
Yeah.
what the kind of, right, what you
Right,
like.
what you
And
wanna eat. Yeah,
correct.
exactly.
And so
Yeah.
that all of that comes with building
Mhm.
relationships. And
Yeah.
what's fascinating to me is how brilliantly the social media companies have done it, right? It's
Mhm.
why
Oh,
they're worth
yeah.
billions. They're worth
Exactly.
billions because they've been able, right, to get to know us.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
we don't even know them, right?
Oh,
It's a
exactly.
one-way
Yeah.
relationship, right?
Yeah.
They know everything about us, right?
Yeah,
And
it's
so
pretty
that
amazing.
enables
Yeah.
them
Mhm.
to drop content
Mhm.
in our
Yeah.
feeds and
Right.
change the game of advertising, right? Allow you
Exactly.
to
Yeah. Mhm.
pinpoint who you want to advertise your stuff to. And it's,
Mhm.
which is a fascinating thing. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes in education, it takes us a little while to catch up. But
Mhm.
anyway, my point is,
Mhm.
one of the things I often say to teachers is you got to go there.
Yeah,
Like, you're
yeah,
trying to
that's
get
great.
them to
Mhm.
come here,
Yeah.
go
Mhm.
dive over there, swim
Yeah.
over to their island and be like, yo, I heard
Mhm.
it's cool over
Yeah.
here,
Mhm.
you
Exactly.
know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then what you do is, once you're over there and you're like, oh, this is what you guys are interested in, this is
Mhm.
what you like, then you kind of glance back at your island and you're like,
Right.
what do I got over there that I could bring
Yeah, that you
over
could
here? I'm not going
exactly.
back
Mhm.
there. The party's
Right,
over
right.
here now.
Yeah.
You know, that's sort of
No,
the
for sure.
mindset.
Yeah, 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 and I think that you can do that, like, even though sometimes teachers are like, "Oh, there's so many kids, how can I do that?" But you can even do that, like, with groups of kids or have each kid talk about what they're interested in or write about it or, there's ways of doing it that you can reach all the kids that way. Yeah, I just have to get a little creative. So I totally agree. I think that's a great metaphor
And
for sure.
if you don't know, and the kid won't open up, I got 7
Mhm.
categories: sports, music, video games, money, animals, art.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
Movies,
yeah, yeah.
movies.
Mhm.
So there's your 7. And like,
Yeah. Mhm.
so approach with that, right? If you're
Mhm.
not
Exactly.
sure and you
Mhm.
sort of
Yeah.
trying to
Mhm.
get the kid and they're shut down, just
Right.
go in and be like,
Mhm.
hey, I was just wondering,
Mhm.
who's your favorite football team, or what's
Mhm.
your
Right,
favorite
right.
this? Or,
Mhm.
and that's why it's
Yeah.
important for teachers to know a little bit about a lot of things,
Right.
right?
For
Like, you know,
sure.
like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
every
Mhm.
Broadway
Yeah,
show,
yeah.
but I could
Mhm.
tell you 1 or 2.
Oh,
Why? Because
totally. Yeah.
kid
Yeah.
might be
Mhm.
interested in that. And so
Yeah.
it's again, I got to go where they are.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
mindset of delivery versus come to my
Mhm.
world.
Yeah, yeah. And I think too, like we often ignore that. Like we think about them in two different boxes, like relationships and then learning and teaching, kind of
Right.
like, but they're so
Right.
braided together. Like you almost
Totally.
can't do the learning and teaching without the relationship. So yeah,
Correct.
I love that.
And I
Mhm.
think that's true in every aspect of life,
Yeah, for sure. I think,
you
yeah,
know.
people are so much more willing to work with you if you have a relationship with them rather than if you're like, here, I'm just a random person wanting this from you or wanting whatever. So yeah, I
Of
think
course.
that does model that for sure. And
And
it
it's
also
just
is a, sorry,
go
go ahead.
go go. Nope.
I mean, no, I think it's just that it's a two-way thing, like that, you're teaching kids how to have a relationship with you, and that's building their
Yes.
social skills too. So,
Right.
I mean, I think
Right.
it goes both ways. Yeah.
And you can always be dropping what you know, like, you're telling me about your favorite football team, let me tell you
hmm
about mine, or let me tell you what
hmm
I did this weekend. And you can, I'm not saying you got to go overboard. I'm
Yeah.
saying just that little bit to where you can be like, oh, you love, whatever, you love music. Did you see
hmm
this article about this? And
hmm
next thing you know, the kid's reading something or they're
Yeah.
talking about something and they're not really thinking that they're reading and talking. And
Yeah.
that's sort of
Exactly.
really the goal, is to
Yeah.
get you to do it
Yeah.
without you really
Mhm.
understanding that, thinking about that you're doing it.
Yeah, and I think what's so cool too is that then it becomes like a conversation. Like actually, the child's like saying, "Oh, I read this article about this movie that maybe you would like it," or something like that. And so then they're reading something. They even searched out something to read because they thought you might be interested in it. And I think that totally changes the conversation from like you have to read this to I read this so I could talk about it, which I think is really cool.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally agree. So these 45-minute bursts go quick. Any last bit of information that you would like to leave people with?
I guess I would say like to really think about the types of questions you ask. So I think it is all about the questions and even like the fact of just balancing, close-ended and open-ended questions, just letting kids, open up, say like be a little bit more. We tend to say like a lot of closed-ended questions, like how many are there? What's the right
Mm.
answer? But really letting,
So what's
ha-
the
you know,
right question instead of those?
Oh, I'd say, I mean, I don't think there's like you can't ask those, but I'd say more open-ended questions that don't have one right answer. So like, well, how did you work through that? What
Mm.
was your thought process around that? Or what part of this was most interesting to you and why? That kind of thing. So where kids are actually explaining how they came to think about something I think that can be so much more interesting for both people, the teacher and the student, rather than just the, quick back and forth of the right or wrong. So that's one thing I think I like to focus on.
Very cool. I didn't get a chance. I was curious. You said you played a lot of sports growing up. What were your main ones? What did you like?
Yeah, so actually mostly individual sports. So I did like a lot of cross country and track and swimming. So yeah, I wasn't so much a team sport person, but
Golf?
I liked all the, yeah. No, I never played golf actually.
No?
I liked watching it, but yeah, I never was, I don't know, I never learned. So maybe I still could. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. What are your sports?
Well, I just learned, I have an 8-year-old daughter, and I just learned that that girls golf is the easiest sport to get a scholarship in. Out of all of the sports, girls golf is the easiest one.
I had no idea. That's cool. It's good to know. Good
right.
to know. I had no idea.
And it's funny because my kids, in fact, right when we're done recording this, they have a golf lesson, and there's like no girls. It's my daughter, and there's one other girl, and there's like 8 boys, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, maybe that's it. But so are you still a runner?
Yeah.
Usually runners run.
Yeah. I still run. Yeah. I had a little injury, so I had to stop for a while, but I'm back to it. So yeah.
What's your favorite listen on your runs? Are you a podcast person or a music person?
Music. Yeah. I can't like really focus when I run or anything. I swim a lot now too. And I have like a underwater music player.
That's exciting. Cool.
Yeah, so I can listen as I swim.
Wait a minute, tell about this. I mean, so is it underwater earpiece? Like
it's like earplugs, kind of like these, and it connects to a waterproof like type MP3, like very old school kind of player, and you can play, like it works in water, and so it's pretty amazing. It's made my swims a lot more fun because sometimes
way better.
Yeah.
I can't, it's partly why I don't swim is because I can't get my groove. What's your can't live without, give me like one can't live without song on your playlist that is for sure every run or every swim.
That's
come
on.
Do you have one?
I mean,
I could give you a couple of mine.
Okay, I'll start with yours.
So, okay, you want to start with mine, and you can think about it. So I'm old school. I'm 46. So I was born in 1990, I graduated high school in 1994. Born in 1976. So I grew up like Guns N' Roses, Def Leppard, right? So Sweet Child of Mine, always, right? Paradise City, always. Those will always come on in every workout, and if they don't, there's something wrong. Eye of the Tiger. Eye of the Tiger always comes on, and pour. Did I say pour some sugar on me? From Def Leppard. So there's 5. There's 5 that are in the rotation always.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I guess mine are pretty old school too, I'd say. Like, so, because I'm a similar age. So I'd say like probably like Shakira, like that kind of like Latin music.
Yeah, that's
cool. Like Lady Gaga, like just like really like.
Give me a song though. Like, do you have a song? Yeah, because I like to add new songs that people tell me. Do you have one song that you can be like, this is one song that I love?
Yeah, no. I mean, I don't really like. I like to listen to new stuff all the time. So I guess that's part of it.
I'm the opposite. I don't.
Really? Yeah, no. That's funny. Yeah, I constantly like am changing up the playlist. So
it's hard for you to get on my list. Like it's very hard to break through. Like sometimes really it will like I just added Fancy Like because my kids I often add songs that my kids are into, right? My kids they've been dancing to that, and so I've gotten into it. So
actually
that's on there.
One that's really good is like The Weeknd, Blinded by the Light. I don't know if you know that one.
I know.
It's like very, very fast beat. So it's nice. Like I like songs that have like very quick beats. And so that's a good one. And actually and it has it's funny because my kids listen to the Kids Bop a lot. I don't know if you know that, but it's like the kids version of all these music. So I'm actually they're always like, do you know this? And I'm like, I kind of think I do, but it's it's because I know like the grown-up version of it. So
we didn't even talk about your kids. How old are your kids?
Yeah, so they my son is 5 and my daughter is 10. Yeah.
Okay. So going into 5th and going into 1st?
Kindergarten. Yeah.
Kindergarten.
Yeah, he's kind of a January birthday. So yeah, I kind of think he wants to be in 1st grade, but he's in kindergarten, or he will be in kindergarten. Yeah.
And you live in Boston?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. What's a can't miss restaurant in Boston?
Well, I mean, the very traditional one
So
is
many.
Cheers. You can,
Yeah,
you go
yeah,
to,
yeah.
that's the kind of, but there's so many otherwise.
know.
I mean, there's like Toro, which is
How
really
about for like
good.
lobster roll? I'm a big lobster roll person. I love
Yeah, but
lobster rolls.
there's actually one in the South in
Cold
B.
though.
Yeah. Oh,
I like it
cold.
more
Yeah.
too, but I like the cold,
Yeah.
like the cold with the
Uh-huh.
crunch.
Oh
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
man.
That's kind of like that. I feel like Maine is like the place to be for
I
that.
know.
Yeah,
I know.
but there's like B&G Oysters, which is a really good like seafood place. So yeah, you could check that out. Yeah.
What's it? I know I asked you for one last thing like 10 minutes ago, but I'm still interested. So what's it like working at Harvard? Is it neat? Is it cool? Are the people weird? Are the people cool? Are the people, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, yeah,
it's got a stereotype for sure.
yeah.
So what is it like working there?
I mean, I would say it's really cool. I think I really enjoy it. I mean, there's so many interesting people you constantly meet. The students are like from all over the world. And so, oftentimes
Yeah.
they'll be like, oh, here's the students from Egypt, from Malaysia, from Madagascar. Like, it's fascinating because it feels like it opens up the world when you teach there because they're just like, they're people with so many different perspectives who've really come so far to learn there. So it's a pleasure to teach there. Yeah.
Have you been able to like learn and experience new foods because you work there? Like I love food.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
what's a food? Is there like a food where you're like this
Yeah.
kid was from here and I discovered this for this kid?
Yeah, actually, Ethiopian food, I would say, which is really good. There's like a lot of breads and sauces and spreads and everything. And actually, I had a student bring in some, and I was like, "Oh, this is amazing!" And so I started eating it myself. And there's actually a lot of Ethiopian restaurants around here, so yeah, I would recommend that for sure.
Is it spicy?
Yeah. It can be spicy.
I love
Yeah,
spicy.
yeah, yeah, definitely. If you like spicy, yeah, you're set there. Yeah,
but you got to be careful sometimes in those places because if you tell them
yeah,
the spice they eat is a whole other world.
That's the thing. It's like how spicy do you want? Because it's pretty crazy. But yeah.
That's awesome.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, it was a pleasure talking to you. Great catching up. The book is called The Art. I was going to show you, actually, let me show you on my phone. I want to just show you that I purchased my copy, which I do recommend everybody get this book. If nothing more than the title alone is a tremendous title, but it's called The Art. You can see it. Can you see it?
I can see it. Yeah.
The Art of Talking to Children, and what an art that is. So cool. It was a pleasure talking to you. Great meeting you, and hopefully we'll catch up in the future.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me. This is great.
All right. Everybody else, don't forget to rate, subscribe, download, and review. I'll be back with you same time in 2 weeks. Until then, I say peace. We're out of here.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.